I'm waiting. Human, hit me with your spray, said the muddy alien girl, a sci-fi HFY story. The sun had long since set, casting the alien planet in an eerie twilight. It was a world of swirling, toxic clouds and vast, jagged landscapes. The air reeked of sulfur, and the ground itself seemed to be alive, shifting in strange rhythms beneath your feet. Yet, in the heart of it all, one human stood, transfixed by a voice that had echoed through the chaos. I'm waiting. Human, hit me with your spray. The voice, both playful and insistent, came from behind a jagged rock formation. Captain Michael Harris, leader of the small exploratory team from Earth, blinked in disbelief. His helmet's visor distorted the dim landscape, but it was clear enough. There, standing half-submerged in the thick, viscous mud, was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It was humanoid in shape but covered in what appeared to be a layer of deep red, pulsing mud that dripped from its skin like thick syrup. The creature's eyes were enormous as black, glistening pools of liquid darkness, and its long limbs seemed to bend at unnatural angles. Yet it stood with a grace that defied its chaotic appearance. Did you just speak? Harris asked, his voice incredulous as he adjusted his comms gear. The alien girl, or what Harris could only assume was a girl, tilted her head, mud splattering around her. Of course I spoke. You humans are so predictable. What did you think I would do? Gurgle? I've been waiting for you. She chuckled, the sound coming out as a melodic hum, almost mocking. Harris stood motionless, his finger hovering over the trigger of his spray gun, the device they had brought to neutralize the toxic spores that pervaded the atmosphere. He had read about these beings, vaguely, in old reports from previous teams that had visited the planet, but nothing had prepared him for this. You're not afraid of me? Harris asked, taking a cautious step forward. Afraid of what? The toxic air? The alien's voice was thick with amusement. I've been breathing it since the day I was born. No, I'm not afraid of you. Human. You, on the other hand? She grinned, her teeth sharp and white against the darkness of her mud-covered face. I find it curious. You're all so frail, so fragile. You act as though this world could hurt you, but you've yet to realize that you could never harm me. The human crew had been sent to this planet, Zinther 9, to conduct environmental studies and collect samples. They had been warned about the strange, indigenous life forms that called the planet home, but nothing in the briefing had prepared them for a sentient creature like this one. Harris blinked. So, what do you want with us? What do you want with me? The muddy alien grinned wider, her hands stretching out, fingers dripping with thick liquid. You have something I want. That spray of yours. I've been watching your kind for weeks now, and I've seen the way it works. You spray it on the toxic ground, and suddenly the air becomes breathable. You've been using it to keep yourselves safe, but I want to know how it works. I want to know why it works. The thought hit Harris like a lightning bolt. The spray, the very thing they had brought to survive the atmosphere, something so simple, yet so essential. He had never considered that an alien species might be curious about it, much less one that seemed perfectly capable of existing in the planet's toxic environment. Why do you need it? Harris asked, suddenly skeptical. You're surviving just fine without it. She snorted, her mud-covered body rippling with movement. You think this is survival? This is my prison. I've been stuck here, bound by the constraints of my environment. I want to break free of it. I want to breathe without the weight of these gases, without being tethered to the mud. Your spray, it could change everything for me, or at least it could give me the knowledge to change it myself. Harris considered her words carefully. This wasn't an attack. It wasn't a threat. The alien's request seemed more like a plea for understanding. He took a deep breath, letting the weight of the decision settle on him. This was a rare opportunity, an opportunity to communicate, to learn from a species that had never encountered humans before. The potential for knowledge was immense, but so was the risk. Could they trust her? Would helping her open the door to a greater alliance? Or was it just another trap waiting to be sprung? You want me to teach you how to use it? Harris finally asked. Yes, the alien replied, her eyes gleaming. But first, hit me with your spray. I want to know if it works the way I think it does. Harris hesitated only for a moment, then nodded. There was no going back now. Slowly, he aimed the spray gun at the alien. As he released the mist, a soft cloud enveloped her, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, With a slight shudder, the alien's form seemed to relax. The mud that clung to her skin began to loosen, breaking apart in smooth, steady streams. She blinked, staring in awe as the air around her seemed to shift, becoming fresher, cleaner. A slow smile spread across her face. This is exactly what I needed. The alien looked at Harris with newfound appreciation. You humans. You've shown me a way forward. The captain nodded, but his mind raced. This could be the start of something incredible, or the beginning of something dangerous. All right, Harris said, his voice steady. Let's see what we can learn from each other. And with that, the human and the alien stood together under the dim light of Zinther 9. Two species from distant worlds bound by the possibility of shared knowledge and the hope that they could forge something far greater than the sum of their differences. The alien girl, her form now free from the sticky, suffocating mud, took a cautious step forward. The air seemed lighter around her. As if the spray had done more than just clear her skin, it had allowed her to breathe deeply, for the first time in what might have been years. Harris watched with a mixture of awe and caution. The change in her was unmistakable. Her previous arrogance had shifted into a more thoughtful, almost reverent demeanor. She looked up at him, her enormous black eyes reflecting the light from his helmet's headlamp. You've given me something invaluable, human, she said softly. I no longer feel bound to this place, this prison. I was born here, but it's not where I belong. Harris furrowed his brow. What do you mean? You were born on this planet? The alien girl nodded, her long fingers brushing against the mud-streaked ground as if testing its former hold over her. Yes, my people, we have adapted to survive. Yes, but we have never thrived. This planet, Zinther 9, it changes everything. It's alive in ways you couldn't begin to understand. The air, the ground, even the sky, everything here is toxic, ever shifting. For millennia, we've been shackled to it. But you can survive it, Harris replied, still trying to piece together what she was saying. You're living proof of that. She tilted her head, as if considering his words. Surviving doesn't mean living. Human, we've learned to adapt. Yes, but our lives are constrained by the very elements that sustain us. This planet doesn't just change, it tests. And we've been tested beyond endurance. Harris felt a surge of empathy. He had seen similar struggles on Earth, species that survived in harsh environments, adapting to the point of becoming something unrecognizable to their original form. He had read about it in textbooks, but experiencing it firsthand, seeing it in the eyes of this alien, made it all the more real. Then, you want to leave? He asked, his voice softer now. The alien's eyes flickered, a momentary flash of hesitation crossing her features. Leave? No, not exactly, but the knowledge you carry, it could open the door to freedom. If I can learn how to replicate your spray, perhaps I could change this planet. Maybe I could change myself. Harris felt a knot tighten in his chest. What she was asking for was dangerous. The very idea of using Earth technology to alter the environment of a foreign world was risky at best, and at worst, it could have catastrophic consequences. Still, there was something in her voice, something in the way she looked at him that made it hard to say no. Was it desperation, or a genuine desire for something more than just survival, something more than mere existence? And what happens if you succeed? Harris asked, his voice edged with suspicion. What happens if you figure out how to replicate this spray and change the planet? What does that mean for your people? For us? The alien girl's expression darkened for a moment, and she looked away, her long fingers digging into the muddy earth. I don't know. I don't know if it will change anything. But what if it does? What if we could create an environment where we no longer have to endure this constant struggle to survive? Where we could thrive, really thrive? Harris stared at her, his mind racing. He had not come here to play the role of teacher or protector. He was part of an exploration team. They were here to gather data, not to alter the course of another civilization's destiny. But as he stood there, watching the alien girl contemplate the spray in her hands, a deep, unsettling feeling took root in his gut. There was no going back now. She had tasted the possibility of something greater than survival, and that was a powerful force, perhaps more powerful than any weapon in their arsenal. If I agree to help you, Harris said, his voice firm, you'll need to promise me something. You'll need to promise that you won't use this knowledge recklessly. You'll need to ensure that whatever happens here, It doesn't spill over into a larger conflict. Not just for your people, but for everyone else on this planet. The alien girl regarded him silently for a long moment before she nodded slowly. I swear, human, I will use what you've given me wisely. I may not have all the answers, but I understand that power comes with responsibility. Harris let out a long breath. It was a leap of faith, one that could very well lead to new alliances, or new dangers. But there was something in her eyes that told him she wasn't just another threat to be neutralized. She was something different. All right, he said, pulling out the spray gun and demonstrating how to use it more effectively. Let's figure out how this works, together. The alien girl's face lit up with a radiant smile, and for the first time, Harris saw her as more than just a strange, muddy creature from another world. She was a being with dreams, with aspirations, who had been given a glimpse of something better, and now, they would both have to navigate the unknown together. As the stars above Zinthar 9 glittered faintly in the distant sky, the two stood side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. It was a beginning, not just for the alien girl, but for them both. And the world, perhaps, would never be the same. The days that followed were a blur of strategy sessions, technology upgrades, and intense simulations. The Alliance quickly realized that this war wouldn't be fought with traditional weapons or tactics. It would require innovation and a kind of improvisation that no other species could match. As humanity's representative, I became both a student and a teacher in equal measure. I was learning from the galaxy's greatest minds, but I was also showing them how to think like we did, how to survive against all odds. Our first task was to understand the Nexus. The intelligence behind it wasn't like anything we had encountered before. It wasn't motivated by greed, conquest, or domination. It simply absorbed everything it came in contact with. It consumed civilizations, their technology, their culture, and their biology, and then evolved. It adapted, learning from everything it absorbed, becoming more powerful and more unpredictable with each passing day. The Nexus didn't leave any survivors to study. There were no records, no survivors who could tell us what we were facing. Every species that tried to resist had been wiped out or absorbed, leaving nothing behind but empty, lifeless planets. We were working with incomplete data, relying on the fragments of intelligence we could gather from destroyed worlds. The device that Zrix had shown me, the one we hoped could disrupt the Nexus, was still a mystery. It was a weapon, but not in the conventional sense. It wasn't designed to destroy, it was designed to break the Nexus's link between its consciousness and the individuals it had absorbed, to unravel the collective mind that held it together. But the device was experimental. It had never been tested in real combat. The risks were enormous. If it didn't work, we could provoke the Nexus to evolve in ways we couldn't predict, and the consequences would be catastrophic. The strategy sessions became more urgent as we raced against time. Every day the Nexus advanced closer to the galaxy's core, growing stronger. My role became clearer. I would lead a team to deliver the device to the heart of the Nexus's territory, where we hoped to use it to destabilize its collective consciousness. The mission was unprecedented, and the odds were long, but humanity had never shied away from impossible odds. I spent hours with the best tacticians, strategizing how we could outmaneuver a foe that could predict our every move. The Nexus was more than just a physical threat, it was an intelligence that could anticipate tactics, counter strategies, and learn from each confrontation. In every simulation, we found ourselves being outwitted at every turn. But then, a strange realization hit me. The Nexus could anticipate, but it couldn't adapt in the same way humans could. It was a machine, a vast, intelligent machine, but one that relied on logic and pattern recognition. It didn't understand chaos. It didn't understand unpredictability. It was a collective of minds, but it lacked the sheer creative instinct that had defined humanity's survival. That was our advantage. While the Nexus evolved by absorbing and learning, we humans had evolved by thinking outside the box. We were creatures of improvisation, of doing the unexpected, of finding solutions when there seemed to be none. I called for a private meeting with the commanders of the Alliance, my voice steady despite the tension in the room. We've been playing by the Nexus's rules, I said, and it's been winning every time. But it doesn't understand the human mind. It doesn't understand what we're capable of when we think beyond the confines of logic. We need to stop trying to outsmart it at its own game. We need to throw it off balance, make it second-guess itself. We need to act unpredictably. The alien commanders looked at each other, hesitant at first, but then slowly nodded. It wasn't what they had expected to hear, but they had come to trust me. They knew I was right. The Nexus couldn't predict us, not if we acted on instinct, not if we fought like humans fought. That night, we finalized our plans. We had no idea how long the device would last, or if it would even work at all, but we had one shot, one chance to strike at the heart of the Nexus and disrupt its collective mind. We would infiltrate its territory using cloaked ships, find its central core, and deploy the device in the middle of its strongest hive. We were going in blind, but there was a sense of unity among us now. Humanity had earned its place among the stars. We weren't just allies anymore. We were equals, and that meant something. The day of the mission arrived faster than I anticipated. The countdown echoed through the halls of the flagship, and I stood on the bridge, watching as our ships lined up for the final departure. The Vori, the Hegemon, and the smaller factions had all contributed resources, ships, and soldiers to the effort, but the one thing they couldn't provide was the wild, unpredictable instinct that humanity brought to the table. It was up to us to take the first step into the unknown. The cloaked ships launched into the blackness of space, cutting through the void toward the Nexus's territory. Our scanners were useless in the face of its shifting energy field. We couldn't see what lay ahead, but we knew it was coming. As we entered the heart of Nexus-controlled space, the silence was almost deafening. We could feel it, this strange, pulsating presence, like the heartbeat of an unseen entity. We were being watched, and for the first time in my life, I felt the full weight of humanity's legacy pressing on me. This was it. This was our moment. We reached the central hub of the Nexus, a massive, swirling vortex of energy, where the collective consciousness was strongest. I ordered the deployment of the device. The plan was simple: the device would unleash a pulse, one that would attempt to sever the Nexus's connection to its collective consciousness and cause it to destabilize. But we had no idea how the Nexus would react. I felt my pulse quicken as the countdown ticked down. I knew the risks. If the device didn't work, we would become the next additions to the Nexus's ever-growing collective. But if it did work, we might just have a chance to sever the entity's hold on the galaxy, to stop it from consuming everything in its path. The final countdown ended. Now, I said, my voice barely a whisper. And then, the pulse was released. For a moment, everything went still. The swirling vortex before us began to slow, its once powerful energy field flickering like a dying star. And then, as if the entire universe had taken a collective breath, the Nexus reacted. It fought back. The massive, dark energy surged outward, and the space around us twisted, pulling at our ships, pulling at the very fabric of reality itself. We were in the eye of a storm, the heart of the Nexus itself, and the device had begun to unravel the fabric of its collective mind. But this was just the beginning. The Nexus had been caught off guard, but now we would need everything we had, every ounce of human ingenuity, every drop of our relentless spirit, to finish what we had started. We weren't just fighting for survival anymore. We were fighting for the future of every living being in the galaxy, and we wouldn't stop until the Nexus knew the true power of humanity's will to fight. The moment Zala activated the compound, a soft hiss filled the air. The vial in her hands began to glow brighter, the liquid within swirling as though alive. With a careful, deliberate motion, she poured the liquid into a small, modified sprayer. Harris watched her, heart pounding in his chest. For the first time, he wondered if they had underestimated the power they were unleashing. Zala turned toward the open door of the shelter, where the toxic winds of Zinthar 9 swirled outside, sharp and deadly. She aimed the sprayer toward the horizon, and with a deep breath, she triggered the mist. A thin, silvery cloud billowed out, dissipating into the sky. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The wind howled, the ground beneath their feet trembled, but the mist hung in the air, silent. Then, something extraordinary occurred. The clouds above, dark and swirling, began to break apart. The air, once thick with the acrid stench of sulfur, shifted. Harris could feel the difference almost immediately. The harshness of the atmosphere softened, the oppressive weight lifted. The wind, no longer poisonous, felt cool against his exposed face. Zala's voice was a whisper, almost in awe. "It's working. It's really working." Harris stood frozen, staring up at the sky as it began to clear. A distant glow that had never been visible before started to pierce through the haze. The stars, previously hidden by the toxic fog, began to twinkle faintly. The transformation had begun. But even as hope swelled within him, a dark thought crept into Harris's mind. What would happen when Zala's people, the others who had endured for centuries in this toxic world, discovered this new power? What would they do with it? Before he could voice his concerns, Zala turned toward him, her expression both triumphant and contemplative. Do you feel it, Michael? This is the future for my people. This is our freedom. Her words echoed in the stillness, and for a moment, Harris wanted to believe it. The planet was changing. Yes, but at what cost? Zala, Harris said cautiously, this is just the first step. What if others find out? What if they try to use this power without understanding the consequences? Her smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. I understand your fear. You think this is too much power for one people. But Michael, this isn't about domination. It's about survival. For the first time, we have the chance to take control of our own fate. Her eyes burned with a fire Harris couldn't ignore. She believed in what she was doing. She truly saw this as liberation for her kind. Still, doubt gnawed at him. He had seen civilizations destroy themselves by wielding power they didn't fully understand. What if this was the same mistake being made all over again, but on a planetary scale? Maybe, Harris said slowly. But you can't just give this to everyone. Not yet. Not until we know exactly what it's going to do. This could be a game changer, but it could also change things in ways we don't understand yet. Zala looked at him, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, she said nothing, her gaze fixed on the sky. Then, she spoke. I promise you, Michael, I won't let this power destroy us. We will be careful, we will learn, and we will use it for good. But the time for hiding is over. My people have lived in fear and mud for too long. It's time for us to rise. The conviction in her voice made it clear she was not just speaking for herself, but for an entire civilization that had suffered for centuries. In that moment, Harris understood something crucial. This wasn't just a scientific breakthrough for Zala. This was a movement, a revolution. But as much as he could sympathize with Zala's desire for change, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him. He had given her the tools to start this, and now, he wasn't sure if they could control what came next. The planet was still shifting, the air clearer now than it had ever been in recorded history. The toxic clouds had begun to dissipate in the wake of the spray, and the transformation seemed inevitable. As they stood there, watching the sky clear in front of them, Harris couldn't shake the feeling that they had opened a door that would be impossible to close. The days that followed were both exhilarating and terrifying. Zala and her people, once isolated and constrained by their planet's hostile environment, began to embrace the changes. They quickly adapted to the newfound atmosphere, setting up settlements where they could breathe without the suffocating grip of the toxic air. The mud that had once been their constant companion slowly began to lose its hold on them. But even as Zala's people flourished, Harris could see the other side of the transformation. There were factions among them, those who sought peace, and those who sought power. Zala had promised she would control the knowledge they had gained, but not all of her people shared her vision of restraint. The whispers had already begun. You see, Michael? Zala's voice cut through his thoughts one evening as they stood at the edge of a newly formed settlement. We are no longer bound by the old ways. The planet has changed, and with it, we will too. Harris's eyes scanned the growing settlement in the distance, where newly constructed homes rose from the earth, powered by the very technology he had helped Zala refine. It was a new beginning, yes, but one fraught with uncertainty. Zala, he said quietly, I think you might have been right about the potential for your people to rise. But I'm also worried. I've seen what happens when knowledge is used recklessly. I've seen what happens when power overwhelms those who wield it. Zala turned to him, her expression resolute. I promise you, Michael, we will not repeat the mistakes of the past. We've learned from our ancestors' struggles. We will use this power wisely. Harris wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that they could steer this newfound potential toward a peaceful future. But deep down, he knew that the true test was still ahead. The power to change an entire world wasn't something easily controlled, it never was. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky once again, Harris couldn't help but wonder Had they unlocked a future of limitless possibility? Or had they set in motion the seeds of something far more dangerous than they realized? The answers would come soon enough. Weeks passed, and the changes on Zinther 9 were nothing short of remarkable. The atmosphere, once a choking haze of toxic gases, had cleared almost completely. Plants began to emerge where there had only been barren land. The ground, once slick with corrosive mud, became firmer, more stable, and slowly began to show signs of life. Zala's people, who had spent generations shackled to their planet's harsh conditions, were now flourishing in a way they had never imagined possible. But with this newfound prosperity came inevitable complications. The promise Zala had made to Harris, that her people would not misuse the knowledge they had gained, began to show cracks. A group of radical thinkers, led by a former military commander named Xander, began to emerge. They saw the power of the spray not just as a tool for survival, but as a weapon to reshape their entire world according to their will. Harris watched from the sidelines as tensions rose. Zala had been doing her best to keep the peace, but her authority was being tested by those who believed the technology should be used to impose control, not just liberate. The settlement they had built together was growing, but so was a growing divide between those who wanted to honor the spirit of cooperation and those who wanted to dominate. One night, Harris met Zala at the edge of the settlement, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon. The last traces of the toxic sky were now gone, replaced by the soft blue of a new dawn. It was a sight that Harris had never expected to witness, an alien planet, once hostile to life, now thriving. "You look troubled," Zala said, her voice soft, yet heavy with the weight of the responsibility she carried. She was gazing out at the horizon, her posture tense, as though something were lurking just out of sight. "I'm worried about Xander," Harris replied, his voice low. "He's gathering support. I don't think he wants just freedom for your people, he wants to rule." Zala's eyes narrowed, her expression hardening for the first time in weeks. "I know. I've heard the rumors. He thinks that now that we've found freedom, we can't allow others to stand in the way. He believes we should take what we've gained and expand it, forcefully." Harris stepped closer, his gaze fixed on Zala. "And you? What do you believe?" Zala hesitated, the flicker of conflict crossing her face. "I believe in the potential of what we've started, but I also know that without control, without balance, we could end up like the empires of the past, ruthless, consumed by our own ambition. I've worked so hard to ensure we don't repeat those mistakes, but now I don't know what to do." "Xander is dangerous," Harris said, his voice thick with concern. "He's not thinking about the long-term consequences. If he has his way, everything we've built could crumble. The knowledge of the spray, the power we've unleashed, it could become a tool for war instead of peace." Zala looked away, her jaw tightening. "You're right, but I can't just kill a movement because I don't agree with it. Xander represents the frustration of a generation that's seen nothing but suffering. He speaks to them in a language they understand." Harris placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to offer comfort, but it was clear that this moment was one of reckoning for Zala. The decisions she had made had brought about tremendous change, but now, the question of how to control it was much more complicated than anyone had anticipated. "I can't fight him for you, Zala," Harris said softly, "but I can help you. We can come up with a plan, something that doesn't tear your people apart." Zala turned back to him, her eyes filled with gratitude but also determination. "I need more than just your help, Michael. I need you to believe in the future we're building here. We're not just fighting for survival anymore, we're fighting for something bigger than ourselves, for something better. But that comes with sacrifices. I'll have to make choices that may not be popular. You need to be ready for that." Harris felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He wasn't sure what he had expected when he first landed on Zinther 9, but it certainly wasn't this. He had come to study, to explore, and now he was being asked to stand beside a woman who was leading her people into an unknown future. "I'm ready," he said, though he wasn't sure if the words were true. "But I think we need to confront Xander before it's too late." Zala nodded. "I will speak to him, but I need your help. We can't risk another civil war on this planet. If Xander is allowed to take control, he'll use the spray as a weapon, just like the old empires. We've seen how that story ends." The confrontation with Xander was inevitable. He had gathered a large faction, and they were not going to stand idly by while Zala tried to maintain control. His forces had already begun seizing key locations within the growing settlements, claiming that they were securing the future of the people. They were backed by power-hungry individuals who saw the technology as a means to an end. When Zala and Harris arrived at the makeshift camp where Xander was holed up, the atmosphere was tense. The air was no longer poisonous, but the energy between the factions was suffocating. Zala stood tall, her expression calm but resolute, while Harris kept close, his hand resting on the weapon he had been given when he first arrived on Zinther 9. Xander greeted them with a sharp, knowing smile. Flanked by his loyalists, he was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself like a man accustomed to power. "You came to stop me, Zala?" Xander's voice was low, almost mocking. "You've let the weak govern for too long. It's time for us to seize what's ours. The spray, the power to transform this world, it's too valuable to be left in the hands of idealists. We need to take control." Zala's voice was firm, unyielding. "I understand your anger, Xander, but this isn't the way. We've already seen what happens when power is abused. The spray can't be used to conquer. It was never meant to dominate. It was meant to free us." "Free?" Xander scoffed. "You've already begun to reshape the planet. Now, it's time to reshape the people. I'll give them freedom, Zala, freedom to rule, freedom to take what's ours. I will bring us to greatness, and no one will stand in our way." A tense silence hung in the air, thick with the weight of their disagreement. Zala stood firm, her expression hardening. "You're not freeing anyone, Xander. You're enslaving them to your vision," she said, her voice steady, but with an undercurrent of finality. "And I won't let that happen. Not now. Not ever." Xander's eyes narrowed, his grip tightening on the weapon at his side. "Then we'll see who's left standing when the dust settles." And with that, the confrontation that had been building for weeks finally came to a head. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut through with a knife. Zala stood resolute, her back straight, her hands clenched into fists. Harris, standing beside her, felt the weight of the situation press down on him. This wasn't just a matter of winning an argument. This was about the future of an entire planet. Xander's followers stood behind him, their expressions hard, their eyes fixed on Zala and her group. The air hummed with unspoken threats, the smell of freshly tilled soil mixing with the faint scent of the new, breathable atmosphere that had once seemed like a dream. "You're making a mistake, Zala," Xander said, his tone low and dangerous. "You've given them hope, but you've also weakened them. They need strength, not ideals. The old world ruled through power, and this one will too. If you don't join me, I'll take control of the spray. I'll make sure no one stands in our way." Zala didn't flinch. She had faced more dangerous situations than this in the past. "I won't let you use what we've built to crush our people. The spray can change our world, yes, but it was never meant to be wielded like a weapon. It's meant to give us a future, not a reign of terror." Xander took a step forward, his face contorting with a blend of anger and disdain. "You don't understand, do you? You're too naive. Your ideals won't save you when the world turns against you. Your precious spray is the only thing that can guarantee us power, and if you're not willing to use it to dominate, then I'll make sure someone else does." Before Zala could respond, Harris stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Xander, you're blinded by your own ambition. You think you can control this power, but it's already begun to change you. This planet, this technology, it's about more than control. It's about balance." Xander's gaze shifted to Harris, his lips curling into a sneer. "Balance? You think I care about balance? I care about results. Results that ensure the survival of my people, and if that means using force, then so be it." Zala's eyes flicked toward Harris, her expression tight with the realization that Xander wouldn't be swayed. The stakes had just been raised. Harris felt a familiar weight settle in his chest. He was caught in the middle of a conflict that could spiral out of control if they weren't careful. "We're not your enemies, Xander," Zala said, her voice steady but laced with an edge of warning. "But if you force our hand, we will stop you." Xander's lips parted in a dark grin. "I don't need your permission, Zala." And then, the first shot rang out. It was a loud, sharp crack in the quiet, and the sound echoed through the air, sending a jolt of adrenaline through Harris's body. He didn't know who fired it at first. The shot flew wide, missing Zala by a fraction of an inch, but it was enough. The standoff had just turned into an open threat. Xander had made it clear that he was prepared to go to war over control of the spray, and now it was clear that the violence had already begun. Harris instinctively reached for his own weapon, a modified energy pulse gun. As the tension erupted into chaos, there was a flurry of movement behind Xander as his followers drew weapons, eager to make their move. Zala, still standing tall, didn't back down. "Everyone, stay calm," Zala shouted, her voice cutting through the confusion. "This doesn't have to end in violence. We can resolve this peacefully, but not if you're going to force my hand." Harris glanced quickly at her, his eyes hard with determination. "Zala, we need to act fast. We can't let this spiral out of control." Zala's eyes locked with his for a brief, fleeting moment, and in that instant, he saw the weight of the choice she was about to make. He knew she wasn't just talking about the spray anymore, she was talking about the future of her people. They could either use this power to build something better, or they could allow it to become another tool for tyranny. "Xander," Zala called, her voice rising above the tumult. "I don't want bloodshed. I'm giving you one last chance to stand down. If you don't, I won't hesitate to stop you." Xander's hand twitched toward his weapon, a clear sign that he wasn't ready to back down. But Zala's words seemed to have caused a ripple of doubt among his followers. Harris could see them shifting uneasily, some questioning their leader's resolve. But then, without warning, another shot rang out, closer this time. A figure in the back of Xander's group fired again, and Zala stumbled back, a gasp escaping her lips. Harris's heart stopped as he watched her clutch her side. The blast had grazed her, leaving a searing wound across her arm, blood oozing from the injury. Everything seemed to slow. "Zala," Harris shouted, rushing to her side. He knelt, his hands instinctively going to her wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Zala, stay with me." She winced but managed a strained smile. "It's just a scratch. Michael, don't worry." But Harris could see the pain in her eyes, and the reality of the situation settled in. This was no longer just a philosophical debate. It had become a fight for survival. In the chaos, Harris's instincts kicked in. He quickly assessed the situation, his mind calculating the best course of action. Xander had no intention of negotiating now. He would never back down until he had complete control. With a grim determination, Harris turned to Zala. "We can't let him win. I'll handle this. You get to safety." Zala shook her head, her grip tightening on his arm. "No, Michael, I'm not running. We need to stop him, now." Harris glanced up at Xander, who was advancing toward them, his face twisted in rage. There was no more time for words. It was time to act. "Get ready," Harris said, his voice low and steady. "This ends today." The two of them stood, weapons drawn. It wasn't just about stopping Xander anymore, it was about saving the future of Zinther 9 and preventing the power of the spray from falling into the wrong hands. They had a choice now, to fight for peace, or to allow tyranny to take root. The decision was theirs, and it would define the fate of their world. With a deep breath, Harris raised his weapon, preparing for what was about to come. This was the moment where the future would be written, one shot at a time.